riled up, him and that girl?
I don't know. But I'll tell you something, Doc. You better not mess around with Neitzer.
Ken Curtis spent 11 years making America laugh as Festus. But off camera, two women changed his life in the worst ways. One was his ex-wife, whose family accused him of something he could never escape. The other was a co-star he refused to work with again in 1987 because of a pay dispute. He demanded more money than her and walked away from the show that made him famous. The truth about both conflicts was buried for decades, but the stories finally came out after he died in 1991. Ken Curtis was born on July 2, 1916, in Lamar, Colorado. His real name was Curtis Wayne Gates, and he was the youngest of three brothers. He actually had a twin brother named Chester, but that part was mostly hidden from the public for years. His father, Dan Gates, wasn't just a farmer. He ran for sheriff and won in 1926. That changed everything. The whole family moved into an apartment right above the Bent County Jail. From the age of 10 to 15, young Curtis lived with prisoners right under his feet. His mother, Nellie, didn't just cook for the family. She cooked for the entire jail. Every day, Curtis ate dinner knowing men in cells were eating the same thing. One of them, a man named Cedar Jack, always stood out. Jack had a strange voice and wild stories, and years later, that voice would come back as the voice of Festus Hagen. One day, two prisoners escaped. They broke the window, slid down a drain pipe, and landed in the family's chicken pen. Curtis's dog, Ted, chased them. But Nellie didn't know what was happening. She thought Ted was attacking the chickens, so she called him off. The two men got away. It was the only escape during Dan's time as sheriff. Everyone laughed about it later, but it left a mark on Curtis. It taught him how fast control can disappear. That moment stuck with him, just like the music did. Their house was always full of music. Dan played fiddle. Nellie played the pump organ. Curtis's brothers played banjo and sang. Curtis picked up the guitar when he was stuck in bed with pneumonia at age 8. It was 1924, one of the coldest winters Colorado had seen. There were no antibiotics, no real hospitals nearby. He nearly died. But as he recovered, he sat in bed learning chords. That's how he started playing for real. Music helped him get through the illness, and it never left him after that. 2 years later, in 1926, the family moved to Los Animas when Dan took the sheriff job. And that's where Curtis really started building the skills that would shape his whole life. By the time he was in high school, Curtis had become a local football star. He was tall, 6'1", and weighed about 185 pounds. He played quarterback and looked like someone headed for a pro career. But secretly, after practice, he was writing folk songs. Songs about cowboys and sheriffs and outlaws. His teammates didn't know he was also in the school band, playing clarinet. He did it all. In his senior year, he even helped launch a festival called Santa Fe Trail Days, which still exists today. In 1935, when he graduated, everyone thought he'd play football or maybe go into law like his dad. Instead, he shocked everyone by using all the money he had, $200 saved from ranch work, to enroll at Colorado College. He said he wanted to study medicine, but really, music had already taken hold. Back in 1930, when the Great Depression hit, Curtis was just 14. His dad's salary as sheriff was only $75 a month. That wasn't enough, not even close. Nellie kept cooking for prisoners, and the boys did everything they could to help. Curtis worked on ranches, mending fences, hauling hay, and driving cattle. At 16, he was already carrying adult weight on his shoulders. He couldn't even afford proper football gear. He had to borrow pads that didn't fit. Still, he kept going, working 20 to 30 hours a week, studying, practicing music, and playing football. Poverty became part of him. It never left. that struggle gave him a kind of grounded strength, and people in Hollywood noticed it later. In 1935, when he spent that $200 on college, his family didn't understand. But that was the moment he began climbing out of the hard life he was born into. There was something else, something darker. In 1929, when Curtis was 13, he saw his father in a real shootout. It happened on Main Street. Dan had spotted cattle rustlers, 3 of them, and confronted them. Curtis was walking home from school when the guns went off. He hid behind a barrel while his father fired at the thieves. 1 was shot and caught. 2 escaped. A bullet shattered the window just a few feet from where Curtis crouched. That moment stayed with him for the rest of his life. He said he had nightmares for months. After that, he wasn't sure if he ever wanted to be a lawman like his dad. But that memory, along with all those years above the jail, gave him something no acting school could ever teach. When he later played lawmen in westerns, you could feel it. It was real. By 1938, when Curtis was 22, he dropped his medical studies and moved to Los Angeles. He wanted to sing. That same year, he began performing at shows, and within a few years, he got his big break. In 1941, the famous bandleader Tommy Dorsey needed a new vocalist. Frank Sinatra had just left. Curtis stepped in. Dorsey even told him to change his name. That's how Curtis Gates became Ken Curtis. He earned $125 a week, good money back then, and sang in New York venues that were the heart of American music. After Sinatra came back, Curtis joined the Shep Fields Band. But it wasn't just about the money. He learned how to perform on big stages, how to handle pressure, how to lead a band with just his voice. Then came the war. In 1943, he enlisted in the U.S. Army and served in Italy. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a hero. He earned the Bronze Star for bravery. But even in war, he sang for the troops, lifting spirits in dark times. That experience changed him. After he came home in 1945, he was tougher, wiser, and ready for more. He went back to radio, and one night he sang Tumbling Tumbleweeds. A Columbia Pictures executive heard it and gave him a movie deal. Just like that, Ken Curtis became a singing cowboy in Western films. His first movie, Rhythm Roundup, came out on September 7, 1945. It made $125,000 in 1 month. But behind the scenes, Curtis broke his arm doing his own stunts. The studio was furious, but he wouldn't use a double. He believed in doing things himself, no matter the risk. In 1941, Ken Curtis was just a young man from Colorado when he got a call that would change his life. His real name was Curtis Wayne Gates, but when Tommy Dorsey brought him into his famous orchestra as a backup for Frank Sinatra, he told him to change it. From that moment on, he became Ken Curtis. On September 26, 1941, he recorded a song called Love Sends a Little Gift of Roses with the Pied Pipers and Joe Stafford. But even though he was singing with one of the best bands in America, he wasn't there to stay. He was just a backup plan in case Sinatra left. And when Sinatra did leave on September 3, 1942, during a big New York performance, it wasn't Curtis who stepped up. It was Dick Haymes. Still, that short time with Dorsey's orchestra opened doors. By 1945, Curtis made the jump to Hollywood. It all started with a simple radio performance where he sang Tumbling Tumbleweeds. Johnny Mercer heard him, and that one song got him a contract at Columbia Pictures. His first film, Rhythm Roundup, came out on September 7, 1945. Just 20 days later, Song of the Prairie followed. Between 1945 and 1946, he starred in 8 musical westerns. Studios liked him so much, they kept naming his characters Kurt. He later joked that he'd be in a gunfight and just stopped to sing. But even while acting, music stayed close to him. In 1948, He became a singer and host at WWVA Jamboree in West Virginia. It was one of the biggest country radio shows at the time, second only to the Grand Ole Opry. This show reached people far beyond the cowboy crowd. That's when he realized something. His voice wasn't just for singing in movies, it touched real people. The next year, in 1949, he joined the Sons of the Pioneers. Their lead singer, Tim Spencer, had voice issues and left. Curtis took over, and his very first lead song with them was Room Full of Roses. That song reached number 10 on the country charts and 26 on the pop charts. Some people say it happened in 1954, but it was actually 1949. He also sang hits like Ghost Riders in the Sky and performed at places like Carnegie Hall. He stayed with the group until 1952, then came back from 1955 to 1957. Even during this time, he showed up on TV. In the late 1950s, he guest starred on Have Gun, Will Travel. In one 1960 episode, he sang a song so beautifully it surprised everyone who only saw him as an actor. He was actually on the show 5 times, and the producers made sure to add singing scenes just for him. These appearances helped people remember him not just as an actor, but still as a singer too. Then in 1959, while filming a low-budget horror movie called The Killer Shrews, something awful happened. They used dogs in costume to act like giant shrews. One of them attacked him during a night shoot in the Louisiana Bayou. It tore into his left arm and shoulder. He needed 20 stitches and had nerve damage that made it hard to play guitar. Since he was also the film's producer, he had to pay for everything, even his own hospital bills. The whole thing shut production down for 2 weeks and cost an extra $15,000. In 1960, he joined the cast of The Alamo, a huge $12 million film directed by John Wayne. Curtis shocked everyone by improvising lines in his natural Colorado accent. Wayne was known for hating unscripted changes, but this time, he loved it. He even said it was the most authentic frontier talk I've heard in pictures, and rewrote parts of the film to include more of Curtis's style. Curtis didn't use a stunt double either. He fought in real hand-to-hand scenes in 110-degree Texas heat for 3 straight days. Then, something quiet but serious happened. Back in 1944, during the war, Curtis had taken an artillery blast in Italy. It left his throat damaged. In 1963, while filming Gunsmoke, he started bleeding from his throat. Doctors found massive scar tissue and told him if they didn't operate, he could lose his voice forever. The surgery took 4 hours and had a 40% chance of failure. He didn't tell anyone at CBS, afraid they'd fire him. For 3 months, he couldn't speak and had to write on paper to communicate. When he healed, his voice was deeper and raspier. That became part of Festus. His start on Gunsmoke wasn't simple either. He first appeared on December 8, 1962, in an episode called Us Haggans. He had already played other small roles before, but this time he pitched the idea of a hillbilly character named Festus. Even though he was from Colorado and had no Southern background, he created the accent from scratch based on a real man called Cedar Jack. This man used to get drunk and land in his father's jail back in Los Animas. Curtis copied his walk, his talk, and his habits. He said Festus was really a mix of people he'd known growing up. The character of Festus officially launched in the 1964 episode Once a Hagan. During the mid-60s, over 30 million people tuned in each week. Curtis argued constantly with the writers because he wanted Festus to be funnier and more complex, not just a sidekick. He even wrote some of the episodes himself. One was called Now That April's Here, and it showed Festus trying to win over a woman named April with a chair made of antlers and pelts that collapsed when she sat on it. Curtis secretly had feelings for the actress, Elizabeth McRae, and used the script to spend more time with her. He also started making money from Festus merchandise, hats, mugs, belt buckles, earning about $50,000 a year. But he refused to break character in public. Even during interviews, he kept Festus's voice. Some people thought it was odd, but rural fans loved it. He did this from 1964 to 1975, even when he toured with his act, the Dodge City Four. In 1965, things almost fell apart. He asked for $2,000 per episode. The producers thought that was too much and almost fired him. But fans loved Festus so much that CBS caved. He got the raise and became one of the highest-paid supporting actors on television. But the pressure didn't stop. In 1969, during an episode called The Night Riders, Curtis got badly hurt doing a horse stunt. He broke his leg, but they made him keep filming with painkillers. He later admitted he was in agony and needed months of therapy. He walked with a limp afterward and started relying on the pain meds off set, too. He mentored young actors like Burt Reynolds, who joined the show in 1962. He helped Burt understand how to act in westerns and get through the long shooting days. But those long hours took a toll on Curtis's home life. His marriage suffered. He often worked from 5 in the morning until 7 at night, 6 days a week. He was tired, overworked, and it started to show. Behind the scenes, he was still fighting for Festus. In season 10, he pushed for more action scenes. He had boxed in high school and served in the Army from 1943 to 1945, so he wanted Festus to get into more fights. His athletic background made those stunts real. He even fell off his mule Ruth in real scenes just to make it feel believable. Then came another blow. In 1973, Curtis secretly did a voice for Disney's Robin Hood. He played a goofy vulture named Nutsy, using his Festus voice. But he didn't tell CBS. When the movie came out, everyone recognized the voice. CBS was furious. They threatened to fire him and demanded $50,000 in penalties. He only saved his job by donating his $25,000 Disney paycheck to CBS's children's charity and agreeing never to work outside the network again without permission. That wasn't the last time money caused trouble. In 1962, he had a deal with Richard Widmark for royalties from the movie How the West Was Won. When the soundtrack sold over 500,000 copies and earned $2.3 million, Widmark accused Curtis of keeping his $47,000 share. He sued him for $141,000. Court records showed Curtis was nearly broke, with $89,000 in gambling debts and a hidden mortgage on his Malibu ranch. The case was settled privately, but it hurt his reputation badly. Studios blacklisted him for 2 years. By 1970, his voice was paying the price. The Festus accent, with its high-pitched twang and odd vocal placement, started to damage his throat. Doctors diagnosed him with nodules and hoarseness. Every year, he saw throat specialists in Los Angeles. Sometimes during filming, he completely lost his voice and had to rest. But he never gave up the voice. He said it was part of who Festus was, and if it hurt, it was worth it. In 1987, something happened that fans of Gunsmoke never saw coming. Ken Curtis, the man who played Festus, was asked to return for the TV movie Gunsmoke, return to Dodge. But when he heard how much they were offering him, he refused. He believed Festus was just as beloved as Miss Kitty, played by Amanda Blake, maybe even more. But Amanda was getting half the money. Ken asked for double what she got. The producer, John Mantley, said no. Ken walked away. The two men argued not just about money, but also about how the script had been changed without telling him. He got so angry, he told Mantley never to call him again. That was it. Ken never returned to Gunsmoke. It was the end of something special, and fans were left wondering what really happened behind closed doors. But the truth was, this wasn't the only time Ken Curtis walked into conflict. Years earlier, his marriage to Barbara Ford, daughter of legendary director John Ford, had ended in 1964. After that, everything fell apart between him and the Ford family. John Ford had once helped launch Ken's film career, but after the divorce, Ford started telling people Ken had hit his daughter during their marriage. These were serious accusations. No court ever confirmed them, but the damage was done. Doors started closing. The people who once welcomed him now kept their distance. He lost not just a marriage, but his link to one of the most powerful families in Hollywood. He never worked with John Ford again, and it left a scar that followed him for the rest of his life. Even on the set of Gunsmoke, things weren't always smooth. James Arness played Marshall Dillon, the face of the show. But as Festus became more popular, some episodes started focusing on him more than the Marshal. Ken never said anything bad publicly, and neither did Arness. But people behind the scenes said Arness wasn't too happy about it. Sometimes, the scripts were rewritten to give Festus more time, and that meant less for Arness. He stayed professional, but the tension was there. Arness had carried the show for years, and now the spotlight was shifting. After Gunsmoke ended in 1975, Ken didn't disappear. He showed up in How the West Was Won in 1979, once again alongside Arness. But something had changed. The years of smoking were catching up with him. He had started the habit back in the 1940s when he was singing with Tommy Dorsey's band. By the late 1970s, breathing became harder and acting became more difficult. He kept going, but he had to be more careful about which roles he accepted. In 1983, he got a role in The Yellow Rose, a big TV show on NBC set on a huge Texas ranch. It had stars like Sam Elliott and Sybil Shepherd. Ken played a loyal old ranch hand named Hoyt Coriel. The show looked like it could be his next big thing. But it didn't catch on. It only ran for 22 episodes and was canceled in 1984. Ken had hoped it would carry him through his later years. It didn't. His personal life, though, found some peace. In 1966, he married Tori Ahern Connolly in Las Vegas. She was different from his past wives. She wasn't part of the Hollywood world. She was a widow with 2 kids. She was warm, funny, and steady. They stayed married for 25 years, until the day he died. In 1980, they moved to Fresno, California, to live quietly. Tori stayed by his side through his declining health. She died in 1997, 6 years after Ken. On April 28, 1991, Tori found Ken dead in their Fresno home. He had gone to a rodeo the day before and looked fine. But that night, he passed away in his sleep. He was 74. At first, people said it was natural causes. But the full story later revealed more. He had heart disease, damage from smoking, and even old injuries from World War II that had haunted him for decades. He had also quietly battled cancer for 5 years, without telling many people. He and Tori had wanted children, but the illness made that impossible. In his final months, he was worn out. He was depressed. He was tired of dealing with money issues alone. He didn't complain to many people. He just kept going, quietly. After he died, his ashes were scattered across the Colorado flatlands where he grew up. His estate was worth around $1.2 million, but the biggest surprise came when more than 50 unpublished songs were found. They were given to the Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City. Most people knew he was once a singer, but nobody knew he had written that many songs. Some were old cowboy ballads, others were modern. Back in the 1940s, he had even replaced Frank Sinatra in Tommy Dorsey's band. He sang hits like Room Full of Roses and Ghost Riders in the Sky. He came from a musical family. His dad played the fiddle. His mom played pump organ. His brothers sang and played banjo. The songs he left behind showed how much music had always been in his blood. His work as Festus influenced later shows like Deadwood. Actors on those sets studied the way he talked. That thick hillbilly accent came from a real man Ken knew growing up in Los Animas, Colorado, a drunk called Cedar Jack, who always ended up in jail. Ken remembered his voice and used it for Festus. That's what made it feel real. He played Festus in 304 episodes between 1964 and 1975. That made him the longest-running deputy in Gunsmoke history. And it set a new standard for how to play rugged, funny, but deeply human characters in westerns. Even after he retired, Ken stayed connected to the genre. He did voice-over work for documentaries about the American frontier. He made guest appearances on TV shows. He showed up at Gunsmoke reunions and Western festivals. Even when he was sick, he made sure every project he did felt real. He insisted on getting the details right. He wanted to keep the old stories alive. He kept doing that until just a few months before he died.